Hello, everyone. My name is Ohad. Everybody settled in? Awesome. Where's the presentation? OK. So we're going to do a WebApp presentation / workshop. We're going to do some coding today. But before we go into that, let me first introduce myself. So my name is Ohad Kravchik. I did work at the New York Times up until a few weeks ago, and I worked for Google New York. What I'm going to talk about in web apps in general, I actually did quite a lot in Reuters and in the New York Times, and I'm going to show some of them, and then we're going to actually build one from scratch. We're going to focus on two aspects today. One will be just how do I actually write code that will translate into a web app. We're going to probably understand before what's a web app and how to build it. But then we're also going to focus on the tools and how to set up a good development environment for yourself as you're building a web app, because you're going to end up with a lot of code. If you want to get the presentation on your computer, there's a link here for SkyDrive. And if you have any questions, just stop me, and there's mics in the back. Just go and ask a question. I think we're not going to have a lot of time for us to pause and let you pick it up on your own and start hacking. When I'm going to start coding, you can then open the same on your computer and start experimenting yourself, and then look at what I do and compare it to a bit. So we're going to talk briefly about what's a web app in general. What do we mean by web app, and what does it mean on our side technically? How is the code that we need to write is different than a regular website? And then we're going to set up a simple skeleton app that I've built. And it's going to use HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, of course, but it's going to use a lot of other tools that help us write more efficiently. So we're going to use less for CSS compilation. We're going to use require.js to be able to break our code apart. And we're going to use backbone to build most of our logic using views and models. In the end, we're going to build 2 pages within our app, and we're going to be able to test them and go back and forth and load data and stuff like that. And from that point on, if you want, you can pick it up on your own and do more advanced features, but that would probably be the end of this workshop. And we're going to talk about what's the other features that you would be probably building on top of your web app. So offline support, how does that work? What does it mean? And these kind of stuff. And then we're probably going to talk about it. You're probably going to have some questions about it, and we can follow up. OK, so let's start. But what is this? What is this single-page web apps? We see it quite a lot. So the idea, it's not just a regular website that you go into, and every link that you click on goes to a different URL, because that would mean that your browser have to stop, go fetch now another resource, an HTML page, JavaScript, CSS, and render this new page. And that's how most of the web works, and that's great. But in some instances, we want something that's more fluid, something that the user would be able to actually interact with much faster. So if you're clicking on a share button, you might want something to pop on to the screen rather than loading, going to the server, getting another page. So if you want to be able to build a bit more interactive experiences, you might be opting for a single-page web app. So what does it mean to have a single-page web app? It means that you're going to have different screens within your app, and you navigate from one to the other using JavaScript. So you're actually starting on one page, and then you're tearing that page out, and then you're loading a next page into the same browser. And that all happens in JavaScript, which is much faster than actually going to the server and bringing some HTML. You will need stuff to bring from the server, like data, and that's what we'll do in the end. And should I build one? It's a good question. I worked at the New York Times. New York Times have news, and they build news readers. So yes, for us it was a simple answer. We wanted to build a good experience where you see like a section front and you click on an article and you see the full article, and it's all within this nice Chrome. And sometimes we need to load stuff, so we put a small spinner, but it's much more interactive with the user rather than a simple website, which we also have, of course. Just to show you how it looks like. So this is the New York Times web app that I worked on. Do you see it there? This is a simulator of the iPad. I think I have, this is the developer tools actually making it look like an iPad. So this is something that we built, and it's out there on app.nytimes.com, and you can actually see that if I scroll, you see everything is like smooth, and you can see what articles are here and what you read, and you can swipe to the next section. So these things, these kind of interactions are not easily available if you're not building a web app, because that would load like another page now. So the user would have to wait. And like the navigation, stuff like that is quite nice. So that's, if you're thinking of whether to build one or not, that's probably a good way to find the answers. And on top of that, once you decided to build a single page app, there's many frameworks in JavaScript in general. For web apps, there are a few key frameworks. Some of them are monolithic, so you would have something like Ember.js, where you would build everything in the Ember.js land, and that's good in one way and not so good in a different way. But you actually have all the tools already before you. You can build models and views and controllers, and you can build database interactions and go back to the server if you need to. And all of this is being taken care of. We're not going to do it here today because we want to show what it means to build those things. So if you understand what you need and you're actually building the small things, it's much easier to then take something like Ember and work against it because you understand what's happening under the hood. So we're going to do a lot of plugging in. We're going to actually embed require.js into our code base, and we'll see how it works, and we'll talk about it. On the technical side, a single page app has one main HTML file. That's one big file with a lot of things that you will be putting on screen. Since you're putting one screen at a time, you're going to have a lot of screens being generated by JavaScript. So you will have a lot of HTML that is not in the DOM, or at least you don't want it to be in the DOM. And then when the user navigates to that page, you would then load that part of the HTML and would display it to the user. Yeah, I think we covered that. If you're building a web app, you need to maintain state, like where the user is now in our app. We'll see there in the app that we'll build, there's like a few screens. Which screen is the user on? What's the parameters that the user instantiated? So in this, in going back to the New York Times web app, now we're in the technology section. We are scrolling, we're halfway down the page. These kind of states, you need to know where they are because what happens if the user clicks on something now? You need to know where to navigate to. So you need to manage that state that is actually rendered on the DOM. And you need to maintain data because you want to render stuff dynamically. So you're fetching an article from the server and you want to display it. You need to then maintain this data. What if the user refreshes or polls to refresh and wants to see if there's an update? So you're going to the server, you're going to get, is there a new update? No, just display the same thing. So you already downloaded it. You can actually store it and do some advanced stuff with it. Usually in single-page HTML web app, you actually download content to your device. You can actually store it using one of the several different options in HTML5, stored on the device, and now this particular web app, for instance, can work offline. So if I unplug my Ethernet cable, it would still work. I can hit the same URL, it would just work offline. And I will have the data because once it got downloaded, I actually stored it on the device. Okay, so the HTML will hold most of our viewport. So anything that's like part of the Chrome, the main part of the app. And then within that main viewport, we'll replace the content with dynamic contents. And we're going to store these in templates. And these templates, since they are HTML snippets, we're probably likely to go into HTML files because our editor supports HTML file and can actually edit and display like color, highlight, different stuff. So we would want to put it eventually in our HTML file. And you don't want to put too much stuff, like display none is good. It actually does not render to the browser, but you wouldn't want to put everything on the DOM at once and like just hide this screen and put this screen on, because that would be big DOM and that would take quite some time for the browser to render. So what we'll do is we'll actually tear down a page and only then inject like an HTML with like the content from the data that we brought from the server. Does this make sense? Okay, so we're going to have a lot of JavaScript here because we will go pick HTML from templates. We're going to munch some data. We're going to shove the data into the template. We're going to render some stuff, and we're going to put it all on the screen. There's a lot of code. If you think it's going to be quite easy, which it will be here in the presentation, it will definitely grow. In the HTML5 app that we built in the New York Times, I think about 5% or maybe 10% of the code is like CSS, about the same for HTML, and then the rest is JavaScript. So almost 80 or 90% of the code. So that's a lot of JavaScript. If you're a good developer, you would want to be able to write testable, maintainable code. You want to write tests if you're building a big project, because every time you change one line, it's just too much to actually test it yourself. You would want to organize it into folders and files. That's what we're going to use require.js for. And if you're working in a team, you want usually to pick one coding style. It doesn't matter which one. It doesn't matter if you're using tabs or spaces or not. Just pick one. Let everybody stick to it. It will be easier to look at other people's code and fix those. And we're going to show some tests here. We're going to write some tests, but not too much. Writing tests is good if you have a project that you need to maintain for quite some time. If you're building a one-off for your side projects, you're probably not going to write tests. But we'll show, because this is probably going to grow, we'll show how you write tests against it. Our CSS, it's code. It's just markup, but it's code. There's a lot of CSS. If you build a big website, you're going to end up with like a 10,000 line CSS file. So you might as well do the same for CSS. So we're going to use a CSS preprocessor called less to actually break our CSS code into meaningful code bits. We're going to have different files, and we're going to have hierarchy within the different files. Yeah, everything is module. We'll show it later. You can think of it as like an article on the screen. Like if you go here, the top part, do you see my mouse? Yeah. The top part is like a module. You can actually write tests against it. It can load off screen. You can test it. You can run it with different views. You can fetch the model. You can mock. You can do a lot of different things if you build it more modular. Sorry. Okay. I think So as we're going to build the code, we're going to see that it's going to be comprised of small units. And each one would have some CSS and JavaScript and HTML snippets to go along. During development, we would want to actually work against that code base. So as we are coding, we would love to see in the browser the different files, the different CSS files, the different JavaScript files. But when we go into production, we definitely don't want to incur the penalty on our users. We don't want the user to have to go and download like 30 resources, because that's how we like coding. So as we go, we're not going to do it today, but I'm going to talk about each of those features that we're going to use, how in production you're going to actually use them to build up what you normally do, which is like a big CSS file, a big JavaScript file, minified, uglified, what's not. So all of these tools actually support a good production environment as well. I'm going to skip some tests. We're probably not going to have a lot of time for that. So let's look at our app. So our basic app is going to be a newsreader, New York Times. It's going to have a main screen that's called a section page that's going to show just all the headlines with images. So something like the New York Times app. Let's see if I can see. Something like this. And then clicking on any of those would bring you to a full article page. And you can click back and go back to the section front. So that's about it. Let's see it. So this would be the section page. This is our general newsreader, and you can see a few headlines and images. Some of them might not have images. And because the way we're going to fetch data, we're not going to see it because it's going to be instantaneous here, everything running on my box, but it would actually go to the server to bring the data. You can think of different, maybe I'll want to embed the data into my page because I don't want the first thing for the user to see is a spinner as I load the data. But for our presentation, it's quite sufficient. So while it's loading, there's probably going to be a spinner, I'm going to fetch the data, and then I'm going to build up this 3-column thing with articles in between. And then if you click on any of those, you will go to a full screen page of the article. Once you're finished reading, you can go back, and that's about it. That's what we're going to build. So it's just 2 pages worth of content. We're going to start. Our first task would be to build this layout, which is kind of nice. We're going to use something that's called Flexbox, which is an HTML5 feature. And then we're going to actually start building our dev environment. We're going to use require.js, we're going to use less, and only then we'll go and actually build this using Backbone. And this is how it would look on a device. So one of the key points for building a web app, it looks the same across different devices. So if you're running it on your browser, on your desktop browser, that's how it's going to look. If you run it on your iPad, the same thing would work, just the same. One thing to consider, you can actually take a web app and actually submit it to the Apple App Store if you want to. We're going to talk about that in the end. And that's something that we did in Reuters. We replaced our native app with a web-based app. Users don't know the difference. As long as it works smoothly, you're good. So you can build your code once, and it will work across different devices. OK, we're going to look at some code now. So we're going to start with a simple HTML page. It will include just 2 references to a CSS file and to a JavaScript file, and it's going to have some boilerplate. And then the JavaScript will just do an alert when it finishes loading. And then we're just going to put nothing in our CSS file. And we're going to use a reset CSS to reset all the different browsers to be kind of on the same baseline. We're going to include that. So if you want to start doing it on your computer, you can fork. I already have the project available. We're going to take a look at it here together, and we're going to build some of it together. So this is the URL. I'm going to leave it out for a few minutes. There's a bit.ly address. In order to get this, you need to have Git installed. If you don't have Git installed, you can either install it. If you're on a Mac and you have brew installed, it's brew install Git. Or you can go to the GitHub page and download Git. Or you can just go to the GitHub URL, which is this one, and download it as a zip file. Once you have it on your box, you can just open the HTML in your browser. So is anybody still typing the URL? Can you copy it from your next door neighbor? OK, let's take a look. So this is my folder. Oh, it's the wrong one. Yeah. So this is my folder. OK. I'm going to explain what I'm doing if you're not familiar with Git. So I'm currently in this folder, and as you can see, I already have a good Git integration. I use command line mostly, and it can show me what branch I'm on and whether I have uncommitted changes. So that's awesome, just as you're coding. And by default, the master, which is what you can see on the website as well, it's just empty. It only has a README file, which is like 3 lines long. Because most of what we're going to do is already set up for us here in different branches. But we're going to go one by one. OK, so we're going to start with 0.9 underscore minimal skeleton. So I'm going to do it on my box as well. If you want to follow through, that's OK. If you want to type, that's great. So I'm going to do git checkout 0.9. I have good bash integration. It actually finished up the branch names. So now I have, is it big enough? You guys can read? Bigger? Smaller? OK. So this is the first iteration of our app. So let's see what we have here. We didn't build it, but it's super simple that we don't actually need to build it. Let me... OK. So this is what we have here. Your folder might be a bit different because I have some artifacts already from previous runs. But what you can see here, there's an HTML file. Let's take a look at it. So this is our newsreader app. It has 2 links to CSS files. We have the reset CSS, and we have reader.css. We're using a minified code on the reset because I went into some website. I got the 2 version, the minified and the dev version. I used the dev version once and saw that it was good. But normally you would want to use the minified version. That's just smaller code. And if there's something wrong and you want to start debugging stuff, you can then switch. Just drop the .min. Just delete this part. You can refresh, and then you'll see all the actual original CSS. You can see classes name and stuff. And then we have our JavaScript, which I included already jQuery for us in the reader file. So let's open these files, and we'll see what we have. So reader.css. I think this one is empty. And if we will look in our JavaScript, I think we have nothing here. We can do window.alert hello. Let's see what we have. Let's open it in the browser. So I'm going to open reader.html. That's it. An empty page. We can have CSS. I can put some stuff here. I can go into my HTML and put an h1 tag and go into the CSS and put some font sizes. But I think we passed that point. I think we understand it. And we have jQuery here, so we can actually run. I think we can run stuff with jQuery as the page loads, but never mind about that. So we're going to want to build up our 3 columns, and that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to look at Flexbox. How many people have heard about Flexbox? How many people used Flexbox? 5. Awesome. So I'm going to introduce you to this feature. So this is an HTML5 feature. Our New York Times web app is actually built mostly using Flexbox because it's so simple to write layouts. So let's say what this is about. This feature, which is an HTML standard, I think this is not the HTML5 standard, but the new standard has some different syntax, and you can click on here, it says so here, and you can click and read how the real standard is being drafted. And I think that is also supported in Chrome, but some other browsers might not have it yet. I think this is the original draft. I think that Google introduced, and I think that what's currently being supported on a lot of devices. You can use both, just do prefixes. So everything we'll see here will have a -webkit. And if you drop the webkit, you're going to use the standard, and you can take into account both instances. So let's see what is Flexbox in general. So this is what you can have in your markup. So something as simple as these 3 childs, and you can then play with them, and you can make them grow and shrink as you want. So you can have the 3 different childs be the same height. Or you can have them expand a bit. So you can have, for instance, child 2 and 3. Within one line change of CSS, you can make 2 and 3 actually grow to the full width of the parent. So it's quite convenient. If you want to keep back in mind that we want to have something like this thing. So we would want maybe the blue ribbons to actually expand. So if somebody's using a 2000 pixel width device, maybe there's going to be a lot of blue. Or maybe even better, maybe we want the center one to actually expand and give you more content and just have the ribbons fixed size. So it's super simple. Let's look at it again. So all you need to do, you start by, where is it? Okay, so we have the Flexbox, which is this guy, and then it has 3 paragraph children. So the Flexbox is display box, and then it's horizontal laying out the children as it goes through. So 1, 2, and 3. And then you can go to each one of them, and if you specify box flex of 1, here it's being done on the 3rd child. So only the 3rd one would flex all the way through. So within like 5 lines of CSS, we got some good layout already in place for us. And you can do it for multiples, and you can say what you want to happen on. This is a cool example. So you can see how they change the flex of each one of those elements. And you can easily do vertical alignment, which you cannot easily do anywhere else. So this one is always centered. It's just two divs, one between the parent container here in yellow is just a div, and the smaller one, and it's using Flexbox, and the center one is just centered within it. So you can see here it's like pack center and align center. That's all there is to it. It's really hard to make it like that without using Flexbox. If you guys came from HTML, you know that you need a lot of code to make it work like that, and different tweaks for different browsers. So this is not fully supported on all devices. You can go to Can I Use and like see what browsers actually support it. But I think most of the tablets use it. Most of the recent Androids have it. iOS have it. Most of the desktop browsers have good support for it. So let's build up our site. We're doing OK on time. So we have our JavaScript, our HTML, and CSS. If you want to peek at the actual way of building it, you can switch to branch 1.0, and that would have our 3-column layout already there. But we're going to build it up here, and we're probably going to find some issues along the way, and we'll have to debug it. So we're going to figure out nicely how to use this feature. So what we will start is we're going to put a span here, or a div, it doesn't matter. And that's going to be our main display. So we can use IDs, we can use classes. This is going to be one for our entire web app. So we're going to, you saw in the screenshots that it doesn't matter if you're on the second page or on the first page, the layout is the same. So we're going to build the left column and the right column for everywhere in our app, and just going to replace the content within the white div in the middle. This might scale for you, it might not. For us, it's going to work. So that's going to be quite nice. We're going to build 3 columns right now, and it's going to be in the HTML, and it's going to live there forever. And then dynamically, we're just going to inject the code into the center piece. Make sense? OK, so I'm going to do something like main. Are the colors good? Do you need brighter colors? More contrast. Anybody know a good? Ooh, no, the other way, yeah. That's bad. I heard it's bad and it's not bad at the same time. Let's do black and white. Is this good? Yeah? OK, we'll stick to this one. Okay, so we're going to have a div here, and we're going to have 3 columns. So div ID call A. You can have a different style for whatever you want. You can see I'm using quite a lot of editor features. I'm going to copy paste quite nicely in Vim. I use Vim. You might be using different editors, but whatever editor you use, start experimenting with shortcuts. That would save you a lot of time. So I have 3 columns. Okay, so this would be left, middle, and right. I can rename them, but that's okay for now. And then the left column, I would want it to have the logo on top, and then if you navigate to the next page, there's going to be a back button in the middle. So I would want to have the back already there on the home screen, and then hide it for the home screen. And then when the user navigates to the next page, I'm actually going to unhide it. So we're going to have on the left column, we're going to have also a Flexbox that's going to lay them out vertically, and we're going to put the logo and then the buttons. And if you look even further, you will see that as a next feature, we might have something on the right column. So we might going to build the same for the left and right. There's no good distinction between the 2 columns. So column A and column C are just going to be the same. So let's put something here. So I'm just going to copy column A at the end. So within this div, I'm going to have another div. I'm going to call it top. And then I'm going to call this middle, and then bottom. Okay, I think we're getting there. Let me put, it's complaining about something here. Oh, it's ID. Yeah, let's drop the IDs. And we're going to replace them with classes, because we are reusing our names. Am I doing it good? It's been a while. No. Does G go at the end? No helper? Yes, awesome. Okay, stop complaining. And I see that I did change some stuff here. I should have undo my changes. Okay. So what would happen if I open my browser now? Does anybody know? It's probably going to not show anything. Yeah. Let's inspect what we have here and why nothing works. So we have the main, and we already see when we hover over it that its height is 0 pixels. And that's why we don't see anything. So whatever we're going to do, column A and B and C, and all just going to be 0 height. So what we will do, it's going to be quite easy, is we're going to go here, and we're going to put height 100%. Okay? Some of it used it before. It wasn't the greatest feature, and it's probably not good supported on all devices, on all browsers. But on the browsers that are actually HTML5 compliant, they're probably going to support this feature quite nicely. So we're going to do HTML and body. We're going to put something like height 100%. And you actually need to do the HTML one as well. If you're not, it's just the body would not take the 100% height, because it's going to take the parent's height, which will still be 0. But now we should probably see something already. Let's drop the annoying hello. Okay, so body is big. Main is small. Main is not taking. You see the body is taking the full height. Our main is not. So let's go into, and I'm going to say main should take the 100%. So thank you. That's awful. Is it a class as well? Did I? Are all of them classes now? Yeah. Okay. So, okay, main is good, taking the entire space. And then these ones do not work because I didn't specify that they are a Flexbox. So they are sitting one next to each other, but let's start using Flexbox. So let's look at the Flexbox definition. So we have display box. So we're going to do .main, and we're going to do display. Now I thought this tutorial used to say -WebKit. Yeah. Oh, so it actually, so here you can see this is the WebKit version of it, and this is the standard. But I think the standard is already changed, and it's not display box anymore. It's display flex or something like that. We're going to do this because that's how I set up already the end of the rest of the code. So we're going to do something. Oh. Okay. So the main is now a Flexbox, and now I can go into the different columns and actually say that they are, I don't need to say anything actually. They're already laid out as children of this Flexbox. So they will automatically be given some, where's that? So this one is taking everything, and then these ones are 0 pixel width by 802 pixels. So they are taking the full height, but the width is 0. We can experiment with the browser here. We can actually test it here. We don't have to go back and forth. And if you are on your boxes, if you're going back and forth, there's a good tool called Live Reload. You install it, you hook it up once, and then every time you save a file in your editor, it's just going to refresh the browser. If it's JavaScript, if it's CSS that you changed, it actually is going to just replace the CSS. So if you navigate it to somewhere in your app and you're changing a CSS line, it goes immediately. And that it would just save us the hassle of doing it in developer tools and then copying it into our source. Live reload. Live reload. I'm going to mention a lot of things, and you can just Google them and find them. I think I do not. I have it installed, but I didn't finish it up. I switched my laptop a few weeks ago. So let's go back here, and let's make it a bit easier. We're going to do call. I'm going to name these call as well, so I can actually reference them all with one shot. So we saw that they are not taking the full height. No, they are taking. They're not taking the width. That's because, as we saw here in the first one, without flexing anything, they will just sit there one next to the other. So they're not actually expanding. If we want them to expand, we need to flex on either of them. So we're going to do the counterintuitive thing, and we're going to flex column A and C. So it means that the content is always going to be whatever pixel value we're going to give it, but the columns, the blue parts, we're just going to expand and take the rest of the space. I think because my design doesn't work well if you scale it up. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say, let's see, flex, box flex 1. So I'm going to go here. Let's see if it worked. Nothing still works. Width is tiny. They are taking the full height. What is it? -WebKit, yeah. Awesome, thank you. Once we have it kind of working, we're going to stop coding, and we're going to actually look at the code that I finished up before. But for now, it's just a nice experiment. Okay, so yeah. So now we see that the left one actually takes half of our screen. It's hard to see here. Yeah? It's in the back. And then B is taking 0 because it doesn't have a width. And then the C is taking the other half of the screen. So that's really convenient. So now I can go into column B and say, column B, I'm going to be, I don't know, 600 pixel. Oof, Sorry about that. I've been switching contexts for the last few weeks. So, okay, we have column A here, B, and C. Let's put some colors, and that would make us understand what goes on. So I'm going to put background color to be yellow. And this one I'm going to put, this is just for demonstration purposes, green. And then this one, come on, almost got it. Okay. And then this would be red. So if I'm going to look at my browser and I'm going to expand it, you can see that the 3 columns would actually expand like I wanted to. So the 2 ones would actually expand and contrast based on the device width. And then the center one would always stay 600 pixel. Is it nice?